All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the midterms, a little bit of poll analysis, predictions, and so forth. First and foremost, use RCP. So there's no link in the description because there's no reason. Just look up RCP, and you can go there, and they aggregate everything. It's also a news aggregator. RCP is highly beneficial. I use them. There's a reason that I use them. I don't even bother archiving the links because they don't have an opinion of their own. They're aggregating other people's material. It's sort of like Drudge in a way, except they do polling aggregates as well. If you look, for instance, first and foremost, at Trump's approval right now, it's holding around steady 44.5%, a little bit below the 45 mark that he would need to be at. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he hits 45. Because you have this massive media spin going on right now with regards to the anti-Trump synagogue shooter, blaming Trump for that. I think it'll have an impact. See, 90% of the population is either partisan or has voted or already made up its mind. Doesn't affect them. It's not going to affect as well intelligent people who are independent, maybe didn't make up their mind. Like, for instance, myself. I look at it, I understand that the shooter is not influenced by Trump. That's bullshit. It's corporate propaganda. But there are some people, some undecided normies that will be swayed by that. I think that keeps him from hitting 45% approval, regardless of economic news, regardless of the fact that it's prefaced on lies. The media's propaganda is less effective now than it has been before, and it's growing less effective over time. Basically, evolution is taking place right now, and propaganda is slowly becoming less and less relevant when it comes from untrustworthy corporate multinational sources. But it still does have an impact, and when you have close races, or a half a point of approval separating him from the magic number, that's very easily overcome by propaganda. Because you only need a little bit of movement within a poll to do that. By the way, Trump was actually a few tenths of a point higher, has stabilized now. I would expect he's probably still going to stay above 43. That seems to have become his new floor of approval, really, for the most part. That's actually very good for Trump, by the way, for 2020. Now, to Senate polls. It looks like in the last couple of polls in the Missouri race, which is one to watch very closely, McCaskill has fallen further behind. It looks like she's probably going to get knocked out. I have to assume the Project Veritas releases that show that McCaskill's lying to her voters have had an effect to the tune of 3 or 4 points. In a close race like that, in a state that leans red anyway, that's probably the death knell. I predict that McCaskill will get knocked out. That gives the Republicans 51. They have 50 seats that are safe or not up or lean Republican enough that they're presumably safe. Early voting is going to favor them. These are red seats, red districts anyway, generally speaking. Like Missouri. Again, Missouri leans red. It's essentially a Republican state with a Democratic incumbent who happens to be, at the moment, weak, but a moderate, so-called. The problem being when you have secret releases that show they're not actually genuinely a moderate on guns or abortion in a state that's kind of religious and kind of pro-gun, that might be a little bit of a problem. So McCaskill's probably out. The Republicans, I predict, retain the Senate. They probably gain a seat or two at least, regardless of poll movement in the Democrats' direction. That could happen in the next week. You got to realize there's still a week left. Well, actually, it's 8 or 9 days, I think. I think it's 9 days. There's 31 days in October. Yeah, because Halloween. So there's 9 days left, a little bit over a week. There's no longer probably enough time to have another October surprise, although it could happen. You've got to understand, one thing is that the entire race could be thrown into a frenzy by any particular event. Like Trump tomorrow could have a massive stroke. That would have an effect upon his approval. It would have an effect upon many of these races. Or Pelosi could, keel over and drown in the toilet after having a heart attack or something. It's possible that something like that could happen. Or you could have a major scandal. Like the McCaskill scandal, I think, is the reason why the Democrats aren't going to retake the Senate. At the very least, the Republicans retained 51 seats. They probably gain a few. Over to the House, though. There's a 90% chance at this point the Republicans will lose the House of Representatives. Between possible poll movement, early voting being not as much in favor of them in the House as it is in the Senate, a more challenging demographic map, because all of the House seats are up in this election. I expect the Republicans to narrowly lose the House of Representatives. This shouldn't come as a surprise, number one. They've consistently been likely to lose it at most times for the last year. But here's the silver lining for the GOP. because Trump will be able to blame Democratic obstruction in 2020. This increases the chances of a Trump re-election. The fact that the House will probably be run by Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is going to be 10 times as visible as she is. What's the last time she was in the news? When she was talking about collateral damage and how it was acceptable. And how, yeah, it's okay if people get hurt. This will embolden the corporate Democrats. Therefore, there will be no impetus for reform. The progressives will be alienated again. They will coronate a neoconservative / neoliberal corporate candidate, a Bloomberg or something, that will piss off a lot of younger, further left voters. They will continue to be rocked by internal scandals. Pelosi and Waters and these others will continue to say stupid things, and Trump will gain the ability to run on obstruction. That's exactly what I expect to happen for the next 2 years, which means I predict a Trump re-election. At this point, it's a 90% chance Trump gets re-elected, if he runs. Of course, there's no guarantee of that. I don't think the Democrats have a candidate capable of beating him. That's the whole point. They don't have a candidate able to beat him that's eligible to run. Like, Biden's too old. He's not going to run. If he did, it'd be a freak show. Bernie Sanders, probably ineligible, has already basically said he's not going to run. He hasn't changed to the Dems officially. Under their new rules, he would have to in order to run. He would have to, perpetually be a Democrat for an extended period. Is he willing? I don't think so. Not at his age. He'd be fucking almost 80 years old running for the presidency. Not going to happen. Hillary Clinton is not going to save you. Joe Kennedy there, he's not going to run. He's too young and inexperienced. And the sort of Kennedy mystique is not going to help you in such an election. Trump's going to run on the economy and he's going to steamroll you. That's what I'm telling the Democrats should be praying they don't win the House back. That way Trump can't blame Democratic Party obstruction when he inevitably does get obstructed on his populist procedures. He's going to continue to do what he's been doing. He's going to rip apart executive regulations, executive orders, by blanketing them with additional executive orders to undo them. He's going to do an Obama. He's going to legislate via the executive order. He's going to have to because the Republicans are not going to help him. For the most part, they'll give him a few things that he wants. They might give him another round of tax cuts, which, again, is good for 2020. And they'll say, oh, thank goodness we didn't lose the House. I guess we better be a little bit more friendly with our president. It'd be an interesting thing to see the party actually support the man who runs their party. Be an interesting time now, wouldn't it, to see someone other than fucking Rand Paul or Mitch McConnell actually willing to shake his hand. Be an interesting time. Here's the thing, though. The Democrats probably retake the House, narrowly. And again, polling differentials could prove me wrong. It could be that polling is still 5 to 7 points off. I just don't expect that. If it is, then the Republicans narrowly retain the House, probably win 6 Senate seats. I'm going with something a bit more moderate than that. I think the Republicans they'll retain the Senate. That's my official prediction. 100% chance almost that they retain the Senate. I'd be very surprised if they lost there. They probably knock out McCaskill. Ted Cruz wins re-election. That brings them to 51 right there. They probably win 2 or 3 of the other 5 to 6 contested races. They come away, again, with 53, 55 seats, somewhere in that range, looking fairly good in the Senate. Trump's approval, by the way, will rise as a result of that. You've got to understand another boon for him will be when the Mueller probe ends shortly after the midterms. It's already been said by the Mueller team, yeah, it's winding down. We're going to end the probe. We're not going to do it before the midterms. We don't want to affect the midterms Comey style, like in the last election, because Rosenstein and Mueller are like, hey, we don't want to take the blame when Trump inevitably wins and his approval skyrockets. We don't want to be the butt of every late-night SNL joke. We want to have book deals and shit. We don't wait until after the midterms. You'd rather not have the attention right now. That's what they're doing. His approval will rise after that happens because, again, there's a 99% chance they're going to have to verbally exonerate Trump of wrongdoing. What do you think that does to his approval? Anyone who fundamentally has no problem with Trump but thinks he's a foreign agent will suddenly support him. Guarantee that's most of the center-right in the country and probably parts of the center-left. They love him economically. They love what he's doing with Korea, too. That'll give him a bit more of a mandate when his approval rises. The Republicans will be less reluctant to work with him if his approval is above 45%. If it gets up towards the high 40s, they'll be like, yeah, okay, no longer as divisive. Let's shake his... We'll give him more of what he wants because he's good for the party as opposed to potentially holding it back. They're still waiting. The Republicans have waited 2 years to see whether Trump will hold the party together. My expectation is Senate-wise, they do fine. House-wise, they narrowly lose the House. But, again, we've got to wait and see what the next round of polling has in store for us. I don't think that the Sayoc or the Bowers shooting or something, I don't think that trickles down to the Senate races. Those are more localized. But as a national issue, it probably trickles down to the House. Again, another reason why there is a 90% chance the Republicans manage to lose the House. I happen to disagree with Nate Silver on the margin. He's saying like, oh, they'd probably win it by 7 to 10 seats. No, I don't think so. I think it'd be much closer than that. Could be wrong again. Could be that all of this is wrong. That's just the way I see it. Here are a few things that could change that prediction in the twilight of the election. Number one, Trump's approval manages to spike or systemically collapses down to 40 or something in the next week. I don't expect that to happen, but it could. Number two, the death of a candidate. Like let's say McCaskill's opponent, Hawley, has a massive heart attack or something. Well, then the Republicans might not manage to retain the Senate because McCaskill at that point basically is running unopposed. That's one less seat they can gain. It'd be a problem for them. Number three, some sort of national emergency scandal, something like that. Like Trump is caught with Russian prostitutes. Mueller comes out and says, yes, he did collude with Russia. Impeachment proceedings immediately. Something like Nancy Pelosi, shits on the flag in an Alzheimer's moment or something along those lines. Those could affect the races, but the likelihood is quickly closing for that to happen. The gap of time between now and when the voting happens is very, very short. At this point, it's barely more than a week. There's no longer really enough time for anything to meaningfully impact things. And early voting matters. Early voting, a lot of the early votes have already been cast. They were cast during a period that happened to coincide with generally positive things for the Republicans. That could counterbalance a few of the closer races, which is why I don't think that Nate Silver's magical, mystical, enormous gap in the House is going to happen. If the Republicans lose the House, which is likely, it'll be by a thinner margin than he's predicting, I think. That's about all. Peace out.